It's right there. We made it easy for you. Joining us now, top-tier presidential candidate, Republican, former CEO, Hewlett-Packard, her second appearance on our show, Carly Fiorina. Carly, great to have you with us.
Good morning. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
Doing fantastic. Tell your husband, Frank, happy Father's Day. It's Father's Day weekend.
I will.
And let's get straight to...
And same to you, by the way.
Thank
I
you.
will be with my husband, Frank.
Thank you.
On Father's Day. Yay.
Yes, Father's Day to all your fathers. I got to keep putting that out there because I'm like a one-man sing-song for promoting Father's Day. So, and in my household, Mother's Day is a day. Father's Day goes on for about a week or so. I have Father's Day week. So I milk it for everything it's worth. Now,
well, you're allowed, John. You're allowed.
I know. Carly, I want to start with, you've got a couple of events Saturday in Stafford, Virginia, one that we were talking about, hosted by Stafford Republican County Chairman Steve Albertson. That event I just put up on our Facebook page, and I tell you what, we really appreciate your making yourself available in Virginia. I have a question I need to ask before we start from the editor of the Roanoke Times. He says, are you now a registered voter in Virginia?
Oh, yes, I have been for several years now. Frank and I moved back to Virginia, which is where we met and married over 30 years ago. We moved back to Virginia in 2011. And so I have voted in 2 elections here as a Virginia voter.
All right, fantastic. Carly, let's get to fast-track trade. It's been revived in Congress by Republican leadership. It's kind of like you take the vampire zombie back out of the dead. How do you stand on this and why? And where are we going with this thing?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Trade promotion authority, the ability for a president to negotiate a trade agreement, isn't a bad thing. I'm for free and fair trade. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that this president is negotiating may be a bad thing. You know, I remember when China entered the WTO, I pushed hard for China's entry into the WTO, but I also pushed hard as a business executive at that time for China to have to live by certain rules. And they haven't lived by them. They agreed, for example, to protect intellectual property. They have not. Now, I know that theoretically, I guess, China isn't part of this TPP deal, which will follow the granting of trade promotion authority to this president. But my point has been all along, can we please know what's in this deal? Because there are good trade deals and there are bad trade deals. And if this is a bad trade deal, and I don't have a lot of faith in this president to negotiate good deals for this country, then the American people ought to know it. So my plea has been to Republicans and Democrats alike, just tell us what's in the deal.
Well, right now you can't even read it. You don't know what's in it. And I think, look, at the end of the day, if you look at the procedural maneuverings that are going on to get this passed, now they've got something to do with Africa, funding that. They're trying to put the rider in that. I mean, it's everything that is the matter with Congress now. And basically, this has been hidden from the American people. I just had Congressman from Virginia, he's actually represents Stafford, Rob Whitman, on. He predicted that it was not going to get past the U.S. Senate, but we don't know how these things turn out, right?
Well, we don't, and that's up to, obviously, the Senate. But I do think that instead of talking about trade in generalities and in philosophic terms, which is what this president has been doing and what, frankly, some Republicans have been doing, I think what people are asking is, but tell us what's in this specific deal. Again, TPA is an authority that I think a president can and should have, but eventually we're going to have to get to voting on TPP, and I think TPP will fail unless people understand what's in this deal.
Carly, I want to get to some of the policy issues, but I have to ask this. The upcoming Republican presidential debates in August, the first one being put on by Fox News, what is your strategy to qualify to get on that debate stage?
Well, I think I will. In some polls, I already have. I think it's very important that I be in that top 10 because that's an opportunity or people who don't know me to see me on that stage. I have the lowest name ID probably of anyone running, and so building up people's understanding and knowledge of me is very important. It's why I appreciate being on your show. It's why I appreciate the event in Stafford. It's why I appreciate the opportunity to headline the Fairfax County GOP event earlier that day. I just need to work really hard to make sure that people know who I am, know what I believe, and know how I will lead. And if I continue to do that, we've seen very, very good progress for me in the polls. I think I will be on that debate stage August 6th. That's clearly my goal, and if people want to help me get there, they should go to carlyforpresident.com.
All right, carlyforpresident.com. Carly Fiorina, I want to get to ISIS. You've been a pretty staunch critic of President Obama's strategy there in the Middle East. About a week ago, I had Senator Mark Warner on our show, and he floated the idea of just letting Iraq break up into three separate entities. He said if they're not going to be able to defend themselves, we shouldn't be involved in it. Now the president's sending another 450 troops there with all kinds of restrictions. If Carly Fiorina were to be president, how would you go about solving this crisis?
The first thing I would do is hold a Camp David summit with our Arab allies, not to talk them into a bad deal with Iran, as President Obama recently attempted, but to ask them what support they need from us. The reason I start there is because our Arab allies know this is their fight. They know ISIS is a threat to them. And they have asked us for very specific things which we haven't provided. So, for example, the Kurds have been asking us to arm them for 3 years. This administration continues to say we need to go through the central Baghdad government, but the truth is there really isn't a central government anymore. There is a Shia-led government that is in collaboration with Iran. We need to arm the Kurds. King Abdullah of Jordan, a man I've known for a long time, was in this country when the Jordanian pilot was burned alive. He was asking us for bombs and materiel. We haven't provided it. The Saudis have made some very specific requests. We have not provided those. The Egyptians want us to share intelligence. We haven't done so. The point is we have allies in that region who know that in large part this is their fight, but they also want to see leadership and resolve from us. And so when this president is sort of feckless in his approach and admits he has no strategy and constrains our air campaign and won't put special ops forces to help that air campaign be more effective and will not give our allies some of the simple requests that they've asked for, then we're not going to defeat them.
So the strategy right now, though, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Carly, but in reality, we haven't got the other Middle Eastern countries, the Saudis or anybody else, to commit troops or do anything other than fly several jets over way. I mean, what would change that?
Yes and no. I mean, in part, I agree with you, and I think in some cases we have lost the trust of our allies. Saudi Arabia didn't tell us about the initiation of their bombing campaign in Yemen until 30 minutes before they started flying. That indicates to me, I've known the Saudis for a long time, that they don't trust us anymore. It's also true that the Kurds, just as an example, are clearly the most effective fighting force in that region. They just had important victory over ISIL over the last couple days. But again, they have been asking us to support them more aggressively with arms, with things they can use in the fight, and we haven't done so. And so I do think that our allies are willing to commit more. I happen to know they have been asking us for the support so they can commit more, but we're not providing that.
Would you be willing to send 10,000, 20,000 troops there, U.S. troops?
I don't think you ever take an option off the table, but honestly, John, I think that question is an indication of how successful this president has been in providing a false choice. The false choice that this president always gives us, whether it's ISIS or Vladimir Putin or anywhere else, is if you don't agree with what I'm doing or not doing, the only option is to rush off to war with thousands of troops. It's simply not true. And so before we face that choice, let us give our allies in the region who know this is their fight, who do not want 10 or 20,000 American boots on the ground again. Let us give them what they've asked for.
You mentioned Vladimir Putin. Why don't we get to that? The Russian president saying that they're going to undertake the development of just under 50 new ICBMs and put them in strategic areas. If you were president, how would you deal with that situation, Carly?
First, I would stop talking to him and his government. I would stop sending secretaries of state to meet with their foreign minister. Vladimir Putin doesn't care at all about our talk. What he cares about is our walk, our actions. I would immediately begin to rebuild the Sixth Fleet aggressively. I would immediately begin to rebuild our missile defense programs in Poland and elsewhere, which Obama inexplicably and unilaterally pulled out of. I would conduct regular, aggressive military exercises in the Baltic states, and I would arm the Ukrainians. Vladimir Putin, a man I have met, has vast ambition for power, and he will not stop, and he has been quite successful in collecting power. He will not stop until he faces strength and resolve and leadership on the other side.
Okay, so let's get to Syria and the Assad regime. In one way, they should be our ally. We all know about the red line. Now we find out that after we had this deal with taking out their chemical weapons, we now find out that the Assad regime is dropping chlorine chemical barrel bombs, if you will, in areas that his government does not control. On the other hand, he's basically fighting ISIS. What would you say to Assad now?
Well, this is an example of what happens when you don't deal with something soon enough. Remember that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, called Bashar al-Assad a positive reformer. Remember that 3 years ago, President Obama had an option presented to him to arm moderate rebels inside Syria to help fight the Assad regime. He declined. Recall, of course, the red line. The point is, if you don't act when there is an opportunity to act, then the situation gets worse, not better. Unfortunately, I think Syria is now in a terrible situation where our options are very limited. And as you know, the humanitarian crisis there is huge. Mm-hmm. Once again, however, I would say that we have a sometimes ally in the Turks who understand that Syria is a huge and present danger to them. And so I think we ought to be working far more productively with Turkey to try and contain this situation. But Obama and Clinton's lack of action when they could take it, their misreading completely of Assad and his character, their willingness to draw red lines and then not do anything when those red lines were crossed, has put us in a very difficult and dangerous situation.
Okay, let's turn to domestic issues. In a week or so, the Supremes are going to make a decision on King versus Burwell. If it goes one way, basically you're going to have millions of people right now that are getting Obamacare subsidies. They have insurance. They didn't have insurance. Now they have insurance, but it's being subsidized heavily. If it's struck down, those people in states without the exchanges are basically out. Their insurance would go away. If you were president, how would you handle that?
Well, I think first, I very much hope that the Congress has come up with a stopgap measure. You cannot have millions of people simply lose their insurance. I certainly hope that this case will put a huge hole in Obamacare because Obamacare needs to be repealed. It is far too complex. It is causing consolidation of the health insurance and the drug industries. It's a complete failure. We now know that emergency room visits are up. Health insurance premiums are up. The number of people who are covered by Obamacare is way below expectation. Ultimately, after repeal and having taken care of those people that are thrown off the exchanges, I think the ultimate solution is this. We ought to allow states to manage high-risk pools. We have experience with this where some states, like New Hampshire, have managed high-risk pools in the past fairly well. And we ought to try in health insurance the one thing we've never tried, the free market. Health insurance has always been a regulated oligopoly. You know, regulators and a couple insurance companies get together and decide who gets to compete and what the rules of competition are. That never works very well for consumers. And what we did in Obamacare is basically take that from 50 states being regulated to a single national regulated oligopoly. That is, a few get to compete instead of many competing for everyone's business. So I think we've got to move to a free market system where lots of insurance companies can compete for everyone's business. We know that the free market creates better prices, better choices, and better service.
All right, that is going to be the final word from Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina, former CEO, Hewlett-Packard. Now, if you want to meet Carly, she's in a couple of events in Virginia on Saturday. Tomorrow, she's going to be the keynote speaker at the Fairfax GOP. And when is that, Carly? What time is that?
I think it's at 5:30. Let me just check here. I'm looking at my electronic calendar. I think it begins at 6:30. General reception at 7. The program opens at 7:15.
Okay, and then she will also be in Stafford County tomorrow, a event sponsored by Stafford County Chairman Steve Albertson. Now, if you want to get info on that, I'll make it real easy. You can just go to our Facebook page, The John Fredericks Show, and it's everything is right there. We'll make it easy on it. If you want more information, you can go to carlyforamerica.com.